Hi, this is Mrs. Warren from Bear Branch Junior High, and if you're watching this video, you probably missed school on Friday, November 8th. This was the day we celebrated Veterans Day, so you might have been out for an activity. So this is a quick little screencast of what your lesson was and the lesson to follow, or excuse me, the assignment to follow. Now, today, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to describe the purpose and the reason why we have checks and balances and how it works in our government. So first, you're going to need the separation of branches chart that you created on Wednesday and Thursday in your class. And it might already be in your notebook or in your folder. So we're going to start off talking about that. We've already talked about that each branch has a separate power, and this cuts down on how large or the concentration of power in one place. So now that we have it in the 3 branches, what is there? What protection is there to protect every single branch from having the power to overtake another? You know, instead of having one king, what's to prevent all 3 branches having 3 kings? So we need to look at another protection against tyranny to prevent another problem that we had when we were with Great Britain. So how can we handle that? Well, they came up with checks and balances. As you said before, we have legislative branch, the executive, and the judicial. Again, what is going to keep one of these branches from becoming too powerful over the other? And that's checks and balances. Yesterday, with your chart that you created with your group on the 3 branches, you might have noticed that one branch or 2 branches are doing one thing, like appointing important officers to the Supreme Court or judges or persons to cabinet or an impeachment trial or writing a law. All of those required more than one branch. Anything large, big, that the government does at the federal level has to be done by more than one branch. And that's to make sure that each branch isn't doing something that is unethical or that would harm our country. So checks and balances what's in place to do so. Now at this time, this is a really good video that gives a good explanation of checks and balances and how they work and how they protect our country and protect yours and my rights. But you can't click off this video, so if you go to this tinyurl.com/ and then put in that code, you will be able to get the video on YouTube and be able to watch for checks and balances. You can stop this video now and continue to that video and then come back to the lesson. All right, so let's talk about separation of powers. Now, first of all, these are the major powers of the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. So this gives you a nice little chart of the separation. But here, the legislative branch, these are the checks. See the arrow coming down? These are the checks that, or the powers that we have over the judicial branch. The judicial branch also has powers, that's the arrow going up to the legislative branch, that they have over the legislative. And vice versa, and how that works. So that's a really good chart to use in your upcoming assignment if you need to. Now you're also going to get a copy of this. This is your notes that you're going to use for separation of power. And here's some separation of power too. You got a really good chart. And as well as this is a good chart to use for your notes for checks and balances. It gives you a good explanation up here and through here of both of those principles that protect us from tyranny. And you will have to ask your teacher on where that particular page is and where those notes go in your notebook. Now it's time to check our knowledge together. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this action up here. Justice Souter steps down from the Supreme Court. Okay? So, what happens next? Who gets involved with this? So we're going to look at the executive check. Does the executive branch get involved with this? Well, if you recall, look at your chart, look at the, look at your notes, the checks and balances. So if a Supreme Court justice needs to be replaced, does the executive branch have something to do with it? Sure. He can nominate a new Supreme Court justice. What about the legislative branch? Are they involved? Yes, they are. Look at your notes. Congress approves the presidential appointments, and specifically the Senate. Is the judicial branch involved? No check. Okay. So the judicial branch really doesn't get involved with something like that because that's what prevents or pulls down their power a little bit. That's a check on their power because they're judges. All right. All right, the second scenario is the president vetoes the gun bill, which outlaws assault weapons. The bill has a great deal of support in Congress. Now down below you see that we have a couple of vocabulary words if you're unfamiliar with those words. And we're going to go look and see how each branch is involved when something happens like this. So, does the president get involved in this situation? No check, because he's already vetoed it. It's done. After he vetoes it, does the legislative have a check? Well, yeah, they do. They can do something about it. If they want that bill passed, what they can do is vote on it again, but instead of just a simple majority of 50%, now they have to get a 2/3 majority vote. And that will override or kick out his veto, and the law will pass. Does the judicial branch get involved? Nah, not really, not with a veto. Good job. All right. Third scenario as a class. President Nixon, he was the president in the 60s and 70s, is accused of being involved in illegal activities that included obstructing justice and abusing his presidential power. So, is there an executive check? Does he do anything in this situation? No, because the executive branch is the one of the wrongdoing. So they can't do anything at this point. Can Congress do something if the president does something wrong? Yes, they can bring charges and conduct a trial and investigation. And I believe in your chart you should have details about the Senate and the House. Does the judicial branch get involved? Yes, they do. Well, they should. All right. So I'm going to go slowly through this one silently, and you can go ahead and practice on your own. So Congress passes legislation to establish a 5 p.m. curfew for everyone 20 years old and younger. All right, at this time, your teacher, you can go ahead and stop the video after I finish talking. Your teacher has given you the makeup work with a practice sheet. Very similar, almost exactly like what you just did with the practice, which is why we did it first. So you're going to fill those in exactly or very similarly. You're going to use your chart, you're going to use your notes to figure out the checks and the balances of our federal government. Thanks for listening, and as always, ask your teacher if you have any further questions or need clarification on checks and balances.